Yeah, so it's really important to us that all of the orc nations have a very distinctive feel and flavour. And that's not just something that gets reflected in costume, it's something that is best reflected in the style and the substance of how they fight. So, for example, of the folks you've seen of late, the Druge are a very skirmish-heavy force. They don't want to make full contact with the enemy. They want to kite them around the battlefield, draw them out, string them out, and ambush them. The Atun, for example, are all about the crushing charge. All they want to do is deliver one fantastic charge and for it to be over. And if it doesn't work, they'll just rinse and repeat and try again. The Grendel are probably the most tactically flexible orc nation on the field. They favour good unit coherency and units that fulfil a multiple of roles. So having that character come through is dead important to us, and it's really good when people coming to Monster can understand the character of the nations and can fight in an appropriate manner. I mean, one of the things I always say to people coming to play Druge is, unless the odds are 3-1 in your favour, don't engage, because that's the Druge way. They're never going to run up and laminate themselves against a shield wall because it's utterly counterproductive for the way they work.
And a Druge that learns to run away lives to fight another day, I think, is a statement that you've used before.
Exactly. It's really important that people kind of understand those differences. They're not just red orcs and green orcs and purple orcs. They've got strategic and tactical differences. Part of the idea and the goal is to give each of the orc nations, genuine strengths and weaknesses to allow the player nations and those taking the battlefield to learn about, exploit those strengths and weaknesses at the end of the day. I mean, if we wanted to win every battle, we could, because ultimately we write the stats. And if you had to fight every battle the same with the orcs using the number one tactic for destroying the players, then it would be, I'd be the only person having a great time.
So yeah, Andy mentioned the dreaded S word there that I'm going to gloss over, but I think from my point of view as well, the character of those different monsters really can come across in the battles that we're actually running for them as well, in the style of things like the mission objectives, or essentially when you think about the battlefield itself and the woods where we're sending the players. Some of that is obviously we're thinking about how we can get our player monsters to act as the Jotun, or what do we want to do when we want to get the Druge on the field? How are we going to make the players engage with the Druge, where we can really sort of allow those monsters to really act like they're Druge? So I think in the past year, certainly we've had situations where the Druge have been holed up in a fortress, and that's not the ideal situation for them. So that really changes up the dynamic of the battle. But yeah, I think one really good way we can maybe move this conversation on is actually throwing it over to Daisy and sort of maybe your experiences with your elite monster unit, and sort of how that comes across when you're actually on the field.
Oh dear, here we go. Well, with the elite monster units, like every single battle we do, it's going to be, well, obviously we're all going to be different from each other, but with how we run the unit, because we do all our different types of barbarians. We have our Druge unit, the Jotun unit, the Grendel unit, and we have different commanders for each one, so it all depends on how they command. But we try to stick to the same with the different races. The barbarians, where all of them are smashing through lines of chickens running away and coming back behind you. It's Grendel standing in a line looking scary. It's all very different depending on the day. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Shall we move on to the next question? So we have, what advice would you give to players looking to get kit to Monster with? So I think maybe Andy, throwing this over to you, and I guess the sage advice that you offer to the new members of the Skirmish team, I think probably immediately applies to, I think, sort of many people who are coming to Empire for the first time or trying monstering for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, it's not hard to get a reasonable set of monster kits together. To a certain extent, it's all about the base layers and the underlayers. So we obviously supply as many people as we can with your plate armor, and as many as we can with sort of tunics or whatnot in the right color. But having a good base kit is, without a shadow of a doubt, the most OP thing in the world. A number of items I can recommend are a long-sleeved, high-necked black compression top, which you can get for about £6 from Amazon. That saves you having to paint vast swathes of your body in Snazaroo to maintain looking like an orc, which is great. The other thing I can heartily recommend is a pair of black gloves. You can pick these up from Screwfix for, I think, £1.98. I've done the research, and they're great because they're very thin. They allow you to handle weapons and equipment and have a fair degree of sort of physical manipulation while not having to smother your hand again in face paint that's going to be a pain to get off for the rest of the weekend. And ultimately, if you look,
Andy, can we just say that other retailers are available?
No, Amazon Screwfix, okay. Those things you can't get them anywhere else. Apparently. I'm not sponsored.
So Andy, I guess they are essentially items you'd consider sort of as base layers. They're not actual kit, are they? They're not in character costumes.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
What would you?
Yeah. They're not in character costume, but to a certain extent, if someone was thinking about putting some serious effort into monstering and PD, the easiest thing to do is to get yourself an item of clothing, in character clothing, to go over your base kit, which is representative of each of the nations. So, and we have a core item for each nation. So for the Yatoon, their iconic piece of soft kit is a red, sort of typical T-shaped Viking Saxony tunic. For the Grendel, it's a purple, open-fronted, sort of mid-thigh length robe. And for the Druge, it's a green mantle, which is like one of those things that goes over your neck and shoulders. You can attach dead scorpions and stuff to. So they are the kind of the three key items that if you want to spend £10 on a bit of material and getting something done, then those are perfect things to come to an event with some monster.
Fantastic. So I guess let's go back over to Daisy. So I guess with your EMU, you've probably done a little bit of monster sort of kit, both preparation and sort of organisation. I guess what have you done then with your group for this?
Well, we've not enforced any sort of, everyone has to have this level of kit standard, because that's not what the games are, really, is it? Monster kit is aspirational, like you play a kit, but we do have, we've been working on some small pieces of group kit that so we all can find each other in the field, because once you've all got orc masks, you don't know who's who. You recognise people's faces, but we've never got the same faces. So I've got my Druge kit behind me here with our belt tag, which is just the jihad symbol on red. Stands out. Half of this, I took off the specific Druge parts, put it on top of my red canvas, and then it's my Wilkin kit. So I like to keep everything. It's good to have everything modular, as I said. Have your base kit, swap out a few iconic pieces, so you can distinguish between the different ones.
Having those, having those things that tie a unit together is absolutely critical. One of the issues that we find is it's hard for monster forces to be cohesive on the field of battle. You know, if I put you in a group of people, normally you can work out within a matter of seconds whether they are your friends or strangers, because you can see their faces. As soon as you put everyone in orc masks, I can stand you with a group of people, and it will take you a minute to figure out if they're your mates or not. So having those items of kit, especially for the emus, who are our sort of elite units, having those items of kit so they can stay cohesive and stay effective is a huge boon.
Okay, fantastic. Let's move on. Let's choose a different question now. So just looking through the list that Mark sent us. So, question: anything in particular, sort of monster-wise, that you'd want to bring in that no one's seen before? So, is there anything out there, Andy, that I guess we've not seen, we've not used before in battles that we'd like to? I'm sure there is.
Well, I quite like to give the Thule a go, to be honest. So, any Imperial rabble rousers listening, if you can sort that out for me, that'd be great. No, the Thule are the sort of the underused organisation at the moment. I think we used them once at the Spurnal site, if memory serves correct, and we've not used them since. I'd be interesting to see what the kind of mass deployment of magic looks like on the battlefield. I think some people probably got a taste of it last year from the Heralds of Eleonaris. You're welcome. And I think it would be quite interesting to see how the battle dynamic is affected by mass deployment of magic. I think it could be a very powerful tool. And as we saw ourselves earlier in the year, there are a number of players who have got together and organised people, all in character, to be doing mass casting on the battlefield, and it's phenomenally effective. So getting the Thule out will give us a real opportunity to showcase that. I think it'd be great.
No, I think that's good, actually. Yeah, it's been a long time since we've seen from the Thule, especially in terms of battles. I think sort of from perspective of myself and Andy and probably the game team as well, there's a lot of development we can maybe do on sort of how they really function in battle. I guess some of the other stuff, this question mentioned monsters as well. I think sort of in my mind as well, there's certainly some interesting things that sort of exist in the Empire world that, maybe if we had costumes for those, we could bring in some really fun things just to see how they sort of play differently on the field of battle. And actually, that ties into another question we've had, which is, I don't know who this was from, but if you could do one battle with an unlimited budget, what would we do? Dave, any thoughts?
I want to do one at sea. So if you actually fall overboard, you actually drown. But we're not allowed to do that because apparently drowning people is bad. So, to be fair, just going on back to what Andy was saying and to that question, I obviously, for people who know my background, I am a massive fan of the Vikings and stuff like that. It wasn't until this year where Tom and Andy and me sat down together. I don't care that I'm a loser, Andy. Sat down that we together, and when they offered me the chance to put stilts on and be an ice giant, as a 7-year-old boy, my dreams came true at that point. You can be an ice giant, okay. My favourite part of that was when Andy came out first, and everyone went, "He's quite big," and Andy's giant then died, and then I came out, and they went, "Oh, it's not as big." Yeah, but I can run in stilts, and watching 12 people. Wear their brown trousers, I think, is the best way to describe it, as I started to run towards them in stilts. Was that. So if we could do it on an unlimited budget, I would like to hire the Cirque du Soleil, so they can all come in on stilts and just bring in just ice giants upon ice giants upon ice giants.
I think it's probably worth mentioning as well, actually, there's a couple of members of Skirmish crew, the Skirmish team, sort of over the past few months, I guess. And I think it was February time, we had a couple of people did videos of them on kind of walking around on stilts as well. So, yeah, there's always the scary prospect of, I guess, facing members of the Skirmish team running around on kind of 18-inch high stilts, chasing people down on the field. That could be a thing that we might see. I don't know. I don't know. So.
No one can hear you, Tom.
Yeah, Tom, you seem to have gone, dude, for us.
It's intolerable.
He's having a hair problem, Andy. He's having a hair problem.
Have your headphones run out of batteries? Try saying something now. Let's hear from someone more exciting. Daisy, do you want to tell us what you would do with an unlimited budget for battle? You're a player.
I would spend it all on monster kit for my unit because I'm boring.
It's not boring. It's the right answer.
Which, knowing I give myself a lot of money to make things for them. That'd work. Right.
That's nepotism was what I was made of. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Tom?
So Andy, what would you do with an unlimited budget? The question.
What would I do with an unlimited budget? I'd buy Tom some earphones at work. No, what would I? I don't know. Actually, I don't think you need huge amounts of money to make a LARP battle brilliant. I mean, there was an event a few years ago now where we spent an undisclosed large sum of money on 3 giant land sharks, and at the same time we choose to run a husk battle, which we spend about 50 quid on some black and white Snazaroo, and that battle was much better.
Yeah, to be fair, it's one of those things of it's not what you've got, it's what you do with it. So apart from being an ice giant, my favourite battle this year was when me and you weren't actually orc commanders, when we were just the hunted targets. And for me, that was wonderful, just running around the woods going, catch me if you can, catch me if you can. They did catch me, and it really quite upset me. So, but it's unlimited budget is a very wide spectrum. Sometimes you don't have to spend money to actually get something decent.
True story. It's I think to a certain extent, I would like to spend more money on base kit for more monsters. But the problem with anything that you spend money on, you need to store it, you need to clean it, you need to transport it. Well, there's a vast ocean of sort of hidden cost involved in any kind of endeavour like that. So I think one thing I would like to see is I'd like to see some amazing Valorn creatures. We've got some pretty good Valorn stuff already, but I would like to see some proper creepy Valorn stuff for when we do a Valorn battle. Looking at you, Military Council.
I'm noticing a pattern, Mr. Connell. Are we using this for advertising and for telling people what to do?
Yeah. No different way of doing this. Tom, are you back with us yet? No, you're not. This is intolerable. All the people we thought would break the technology, would it be Tom? Right, well, I'll scroll up and I'll have free reign with a question. Okay, here's a good one. So this is from Kickboxing Kid. I don't know who that is. When PD came up with the EMU initiative, what were their aims and goals, and what did PD expect from the players? So I'll kick off a little bit on that. So one of the ideas that had been around for sort of since the beginning that PD had been sort of championing was, wouldn't it be cool if you wanted to be a really cool barbarian and put a bit more effort into monster kit, and said, you could be a cool orc. But it wasn't really taken any further than that, because there's huge logistical problems around it, because we need to organise people for a battle. We need to make sure that people can turn up at the right time, be briefed in the right way, and most importantly for us, be consistent so we can plan battles. So we decided on the EMU initiative, and the idea was to get people more excited and more involved in monstering, to say, right, every time you go out as this orc nation, you can play a unit of your toon Orvenoir. So give people the chance to bring some specific monster kit for it and play that every time. And as PD then gave them some money to put towards making kit with the expectation that people would have a really good time. Because ultimately that's what it's about. If you put more effort into monstering, you have an exponentially large amount of fun come out of the other end, and you make great games for the players on the other side of the field as well. And that was the whole aim of the EMU initiative. And it's been very successful. We've got lots of great people involved with it. And from a purely practical point of view, it gives people who are unused to battle command and combat command an opportunity to try those things out live while they're not playing, so they don't embarrassingly get all their friends killed?
So, from my point of view, from what I do on a battle morning, obviously I deal with the players as they come through the prep tent. With the emu, because the night before, whatever time me, Andy, and Tom have our meeting, we know what emus we're getting. We know how that's going to work. So the initiative for that is we know before we even start and who's going to turn up. We know we're going to have X, Y, and Z from the emus, which is good because we can plan certain things which makes our lives easier. And then from my point of view, when they come through the battle prep tent, I know exactly what they're doing. I know exactly where to stand them. And as Daisy pointed out with her kit, it's brilliant kit that we know what's going on and they know who is who. So I think Tom may be back.
Well, like I say, let's hear from Tom briefly, and then we'll go to Daisy. No, you've got nothing to say, Tom. Sad times, buddy. Daisy.
I'll admit that I've lost track of what question we're doing.
Tell me about why being an emu is brilliant.
Oh, well, it's more fun. Straight up, it's more fun. You have that that level of cohesion that you get as a player fighting with your nation, rather than just being go over there, fight those people. Okay, you've died. Now you go over there and running back and forth, being some kind of death block, I suppose. So you go but yeah, it adds that extra element of of role playing to it. You know, you have your hierarchy, you have your commanders, you have your various heroes. You have an opportunity to be absolutely horrible occasionally, and just all around, it feels like it's been really worth it. I don't think I go back to just being one of the regular barbarian orcs. I mean, I can't. I have to be in charge of this stuff, but if something happened and changed nation, I would pick it up again. It's definitely worth doing.
Awesome, thank you for that. Tom, let's see if we can hear from you. No, we can't hear from Tom. I'm assuming it's because he's using some sort of willfully non-conformist Apple technology instead of a proper computer. Okay, well, while Tom restarts his computer, we'll cut to a side question, which is it true the battle team hierarchy is based purely on height? No, it's not.
It is, but not the way that people think. So, as far as I'm aware, I'm in charge. I'm wrong, aren't I? I'm wrong.
So I'm going to skip down to quite an interesting question we've had from someone here. It's so how do you balance out how well a battle goes for the Empire? The short answer is we don't balance that out at all. If people come on the field and make horrendous and terrible balls up things, they're all going to die. That's absolutely part of the game. Now, one of the things we have done, so I remember years ago there was a sort of various commentary on, oh, why do you always chase us back to the gate? It's not cool. And to a certain extent, we have we've moved away from doing that kind of thing, mainly for two reasons. Number one is obviously the safety element. LARP fighting is generally fairly safe. However, we tend to find when people get into a situation where they are in character scared and panicking, they're much more likely to do stupid things like fall over each other, run into trees, try and squeeze 50 people through a gap that's wide enough for two people. So to a certain extent, we've moved a little bit away from that but in a characterful way. I mean, there was a battle last year, possibly the year before, where a load of nations went out against the Druge, who are my favourite orc nation. They did horribly badly, failed to achieve any of their objectives, got completely surrounded, and it would have been actually reasonably straightforward for us to wipe everybody out. But
They didn't get surrounded, Andy. They just decided to attack in all directions. Is that what was told to us? Is that what we went with?
I'm not going to comment on the tactics on the player side. That would be rude. But it was in theory the Druge could have wiped the players out at that point. But the Druge thing is about causing fear in your enemy. So it was a perfect opportunity for the Druge to bring that fear factor, and there was just this great scene where you had the players kind of straggling off the field in this sort of thinning column, shadowed on either side by the Druge troops, banging their shields and howling and making all sorts of awful noise about that. You could sense the terror in people, and it gave a great in-character impact, but without having to have 300 people make new characters. And it was still in character for the orcs to have done that. So part of the big thing, as I said at the start of the talk, is there are no managed outcomes. We don't plan for players to win or lose. We just set the scenario and then let it run free. So to a certain extent, balancing how well a battle goes for the Imperial troops is not something we do. Let's see if we've got Tom back. Have you tried taking your headset off and using your PC mic? You have. Have you tried disconnecting and doing it on your phone instead?
Can you talk? Oh no, he's gone. I was about to say, do you think Tom could talk to us interpretive dance?
I, for one, would like to see that, but it's
I
not
would
going to happen.
love to see that, to be honest.
Okay, let me scroll up and have a look at another question. Another one. Are there any of the other nations you particularly want to play, and why? So I'm assuming we mean I've spoken a little bit about the Thule. I think we mean the sort of non-orc nations. So Daisy is probably, as a player, has the most contact with people from foreign nations who aren't necessarily orcs. Which one would you like to see on the battlefield?
Well, I've heard people making interesting noises in the Iron Confederacy. But me personally, I don't want to play it anymore because I already have too much monster kit and I get shouted at when I put it all in the car and it takes all of this. So, wrong person to ask, really.
Reasonable. Dave, have you got someone that you'd like to see?
I honestly just want us to all get along. It'd just be a lot easier. I honestly, I don't know, to be honest, because I like the ones we're doing at the moment. I am quite straight down the line. I like the orcs we're using at the moment. Until you mentioned it earlier, Andy, I hadn't even thought about the Thule. Magic is something I struggle with because, if you're going to kill somebody, just look them in the eyes and hit them to watch the life drain from their eyes. That's kind of the way I work. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, but the Iron Confederacy, I like the idea of that, but it's too Norman for my. I'm not allowed to say that, am I? It's too Norman for my liking. But yeah, so I agree, to be honest, with exactly what Daisy said.
Thanks. I quite like to see the Iron Confederacy get a rollout. I don't know if it's patently obvious, but when we designed the forces battle for the Orc nations, it's exactly like creating an army list for Warhammer Fantasy Battle. And we've written a really good army list for the Iron Confederacy, and I'm really looking forward to having an opportunity to using it. Although I think it'll be an interesting dynamic because they won't be wearing masks. I think they will be disproportionately effective, and everyone will be very surprised for a short time.
I think you may be right.
Tom's back. Oh no, I shouldn't have said anything, should I? Let's see if he's...
Yeah, out of everybody, Tom was not the one I was expecting to have technical issues. Me and you are proper Neanderthals when it comes to computers. Tom's
Thanks.
the clever one. What's this all about?
Yeah, I know. Tell me about it, right?
Well, we're glad you're back with us. Daisy's laptop
Thank
has
you.
now crashed, so she'll be back in a minute. So, Tom, if you'd like to tell us which nation you would like to see that's not currently in play.
Okay, so I think for me, it would actually be the Thule. We covered that earlier. I think there's certainly going to be a very different style of battle. Looking back to, I guess, the first few years of Empire with how the Thule ran, I think there's certainly some changes that we would make to exactly how they fight, but some of those key themes there, obviously the big ritual teams, the wizards, sort of essentially battle wizards, I think, sort of big units of them, but also some of the other elements that I guess more veteran players might have experienced, things like the husks as well. So essentially one of the troops the Thule often use are essentially sort of animated corpses possessed by winter spirits. So they're essentially, driven into battle by the Thule sort of wizards, essentially used as, I guess, not quite cannon fodder, but, there to sort of just get in the way of enemy troops, tie up sort of the enemy. So that could be really interesting there. Slightly different, a different dynamic to what we've seen, certainly. And yeah, as I guess Andy said, Iron Confederacy could be very interesting, very different. Some of the kind of influences also, I think, drawn from some of the different imperial nations, probably reflected a little bit in how some of the Iron Confederacy, how we expect them to work. Not naming any names of nations there, I don't think, actually. Let's try and, we'll let players guess at that. But yeah, that, and also, I think looking forward, just seeing how we can explore the Valorn a little bit more. I think in the last year, we've certainly seen sort of some changes there. We've been able to bring in a few kind of, I guess, real monsters with them, but also there's the really interesting elements as well of essentially some of the, I guess, the heralds that are aligned with the Spring Eternals there, and then they're more, I guess, human agents as well. So quite a lot to explore there. So I'm also going to have to hand over to somebody else as well in terms of reading off questions, because due to my setup now, I've lost the text stream of questions from Mark, unfortunately.
Well, I'll step up there, Tom.
Thank you.
Anytime, buddy. Here's a good one. I think this is quite an interesting question. I'll be interested to see what the two of you say, and then I'll give my answer. I believe there's a question from the forums. It's, what's the best real-life skill for monstering?
Yeah, so from my perspective, I guess, if you are going on battles as a player or a monster, I guess I'm one of the few people on the field. We've got the referees and myself and the other members of the battle support. We're there essentially kind of not engaged in the fighting. So I guess I get to see, along with kind of Emma, who heads up the referees, we actually spend a lot of time, I guess, kind of looking at the battle and watching people fight. For me, I think that real hard skill, it's not fighting. It's actually, for me, situational awareness. The hilarious thing is, obviously, we put half of the people on our battlefields into orc masks, which obviously limits your ability to see and hear somewhat. But certainly, both from player side and monster side, if you are aware of what's happening around you, you can really increase your own effectiveness. It's knowing when you might be outflanked on your left. You can see that over to the right, where you know that your heavier troops are, they're about to get engaged. Maybe the unit you're fighting with can respond to that a little bit more, because you can just see you're aware of what's happening around you.
Dave, your answer to what is the most important real-life skill for monstering?
I know this is difficult for some people, but having friends, and I know that's so cliche. I know I'm sorry, it's weird. But as you mentioned earlier, if we talk about the Druge on their own will not engage. having friends, knowing what other people are going to do. So one of the things that me and Andy do quite well, if we're both on the battlefield when we've got 2 units, is Andy will go in as a solid war with them and grind people down, and then I will use a unit to just appear from nowhere and just go. And knowing what your friends can do is brilliant. And I hate this saying we use at work. Communication is key. That is a real life skill that I think being on a battlefield is amazing, and I got that one in.
Actually, I think that's
a lengthy
great
answer. But,
yeah, maybe we should hand over to Daisy for this. Actually, if you were able to jump in, Daisy, I guess what real life skills are good, imperative to have as a player monster unit?
that wasn't the question. The question, which is the most important real life skill to bring monster?
Okay, okay. What is the most important real life skill?
Oh, you're still on mute, Daisy. We can't hear you.
Oh,
There you go.
yeah. Good. I'm sure I pressed unmute, but do I sound okay?
Yep, sound perfect.
Good, good. Real world skill. Either being able to listen to other people or to be able to run away.
Both strong answers.
Decent stamina, because you will be told to go to this side of the field, that side of the field, go back again, go halfway, no wait, go back.
Best piece of equipment in a fight. Decent pair of running shoes.
There you go.
A range of interesting answers there, but Daisy is obviously correct. The most important skill from the real world to bring with you monstering is the ability to listen. We really appreciate it. Thanks.
I think actually mentioning as well, sort of being able to run away. It's a fascinating thing, actually. I think it's one of the things we've managed to do quite well, is to give the ability for our monsters to be able to do that, to run away, to withdraw, to tactically reposition. Knowing that you're not just there to throw yourselves against the heroes of the Empire, to keep hitting them as long as you're alive, drop to the floor and then go back to respawn. I think if you can, you're again aware, if you're aware of the situation around you, running away actually can really change the way of battle fights. You think Dawn is about to come in and commit and absolutely obliterate half of your flank, just pulling back a bit and preventing them actually wanting to charge, because suddenly they have to move further. They have to actually really expose themselves if they want to make that charge. So yeah, pulling back, reforming is a really, really, really good thing.
I'm going to follow up that question with a slightly more controversial question that I'm going to answer very quickly, and then we'll never speak of it again. And the question is, duels. What are your opinions on them? Well, my opinions on this are quite strong and more important than anyone else's, so I'm not even going to ask the rest of you. Duels at laugh are rubbish, especially on the battlefield. There is nothing worse than going to the battlefield and watching everyone else do the fighting while you don't. It doesn't really fit in with the feel and flavour of any of the Orc nations. For a long time, there was a terrible misconception that the Yatoon sense of honour had this sort of dueling culture attached to it, which it doesn't. And we try every event to stamp it out as hard as we can, and yet people still insist on doing it. So for any of you watching, next time you're playing Yatoon, please, for the love of God, honour duels and not one-on-one things. Thank you. Thank you.
If I've got 5 mates, I'm going to kick you in with 5 mates.
Yeah, I think let's move on to the next question, Andy.
So next one we'll go on to, I quite like this one. Is there more space for built-up battle fortifications that aren't the palisades or the fort in the woods?
More space. I guess there are lots of locations within the woods and on the field where we can put those palisades. We could build other buildings, potentially. But yes, I guess there's logistics there in terms of, I guess, our lovely skirmish crew, we have to get them to build it, and then we have to get them to take it down each event. There is a limit to their patience and sort of our own inventiveness every single event to do that. So I think that's why you kind of see them at some battles. You don't see them in every single one. And also, I guess one of the big difficulties is, we are running two battles every event. We can't easily move things around the battlefield from Saturday to Sunday.
Yeah, strong answer. I mean, we do have a variety of battlefield scenery at our disposal at the moment, and we try and use it in sort of different and varying ways. But again, as I touched on earlier in our question about unlimited budgets, it's all well and good to buy a cool thing, but then you need to store it, maintain it, transport it, set it up, take it down again, all of which is often more effort involved than actually making the thing in the first place. So we would like to do more if we can, but I think one of the issues we have at the current site is we are pretty much out of space. Certainly from my perspective, with the number of players that we have on the battlefield at the moment, the battlefield in terms of its physical size needs to be about twice as big, and I mean the woods and the field combined together, to get a really good battle with free-flowing and dynamic movement, which is what we want. We need about twice as much space as we've currently got, and realistically, we don't have it. When we do a fight on the field, it's entirely possible for the player forces to form a line between the two out-of-character boundaries and just roll forwards, which is boring as all hell.
Yeah, I think, though, that kind of, I guess that limitation on space, though, has made us quite inventive as well, I guess, on how we do end up actually using the field and things. So, and things like the fortress in the woods and the palisades that we're able to deploy do help us with that. So yeah, I guess that will be something that will continue to use help with that issue.
So I'm gonna ask the next one, which is I think mainly directed at Tom in terms of plot stuff, and that's how can we influence or request skirmishes?
Yeah, so I guess this comes up a little bit. It's certainly one of the themes throughout, I guess, kind of a fair bit of the Empire game. Really sort of the main levers that you have in terms of sort of combat skirmishes, plots, and sort of being able to request them. They are essentially levers within the game. They exist as the silent bell, which I believe is through the synod. So that's there is somebody on the field there, I think actually is at the Council of 9 who can deploy essentially a special resource that will be able to influence plot. Also things like the historical research that can be conducted. They are ways in which essentially potentially you could sort of signal to the game team, to plot writers, this is something that we're interested in, we want to look into this, and then potentially for the next event, something may come up. There may be an opportunity there for players to, I guess, go through the Sentinel Gate to recover some historical relic, or to engage a particular enemy, something like that. So, and I think we've actually, thinking back to some of the skirmishes we've done over the past couple of years with a couple of our plot writers, we've certainly actually utilised that sort of feedback mechanism. So players have done a thing through the Senate, through the Synod, that has signalled sort of their intent and want to actually be able to do something within the game. And yeah, that does happen. But I think it's important to say as well, just because you want to do a particular thing doesn't mean we're going to be running it. And generally, most of the combat sort of elements of the game do come up through the Winds of Fortune. But there are obviously kind of plot skirmishes, we tend to call them, that the other plot writers will utilise the skirmish team for. They're not necessarily, I guess, combat encounters, but they do come up. Move on.
Lovely, thank you, Tom. Just unmuting myself there. Okay, so we're going to do a quick one. I'm going to go around and ask everybody a thing again. It's a question, I think it's from the forums. So what has been your most fun monstering moment roleplay-wise? So in terms of coolness and drama or most emotional content, I think we'll go to Daisy first, and you can cheat and give us 2, because you can talk about playing and monstering.
Well, as far as monstering goes, we were expecting to just be normal Grendel, and we're having the battle with the land sharks. So it can be your unit is going to protect this land shark. Here it is. Oh, your rider hasn't turned up. We don't know where they are, and we can't get hold of them. We need someone to go up there who can fit in the gap. There was 2 of us, and the other one was scared of heights, so up I went on top of the land shark. and got to spend a battle on that. And that was absolutely fantastic, and I'd love to do it again, but it's never going to happen again because it was just a freak incident. But
it'll happen again. It'll happen again. You just need a war with the Grendel.
Oh well, I'm freeborn. I don't want more Grendel.
Reasonable.
Shoo them away. No more fights. Just banish them. I don't care anymore.
The coolest moment playing for you?
It was actually probably when I got eaten by a Siaka Herald. Yeah,
Quick, look awkward, everybody.
Yeah, it's all right. I met the person who ate me. He was nice. It was fine. Yeah, I ended up just completely on my own because I got impaled in the leg and no one thought to grab me as we retreated. And then a Grendel came over and cleaved everything, and then summoned over a Siaka Herald, and then I got eaten, and I know the exact spot where I got eaten. I could stand there and go, oh, this is where I died, and it's very strange. But it was very cool. It was definitely traumatic at the time. I think I cried for about 12 hours. But yeah, it was, looking back, it was great fun. So, not that I'm in a rush to do it again.
Reasonable.
Yeah.
Excellent. Cool, thank you. Tom, your coolest on-field moment? Preferably in costume, not wearing a tabard.
Yeah, that becomes quite difficult, actually. So I guess it's probably worth mentioning. We've had, 7 solid years of Empire. And I've actually, honestly, only ever monstered one battle. That was when we were still back at Tournament Stud. So every other opportunity there have been battles, I have essentially battle refed them, or I've been playing. And then, following that, it's obviously been doing the role that I'm doing now in terms of, I guess, leading the plot side of the battle. So there was one opportunity that I did so. I monstered. I think I was too late to get a ref tabard, so I couldn't ref. And I think, Andy, it's probably one of the first times we actually you started coming on board with sort of running some of the battle elements. I think it was probably a Druge. It was the time we were fighting the Druge. So yeah, I think some of that actually is when Andy and I started talking about how we run things like the elite monster units, and how actually we sort of built up that chain of command on the battlefield, being able to pull units back and forth. So yeah, that is actually honestly my own only time I've actually monstered at Empire. But certainly there has been times, I think, in the past few years when I've gone out with skirmish crew on skirmishes as well. Had great fun, I guess, playing kind of random third Jotun on the left, played several Jarls and things. So there's been quite a bit, I guess, in terms of probably more of the NPC side of things. The guess there's been a fair number of Wintermark players, a couple of other players from nations who at the start of last year will have gone out the night before a battle to meet the Jotun. There was a bit of a parlay the night before a battle. So being involved in that, I guess, was also really interesting to be able to see sort of what we'd be doing the next day. So yeah, actually, I'm not the best person to answer that question.
That's fine. Thanks for your lengthy answer anyway. Dave?
So I think I have 2, actually. My first one I mentioned earlier was being an ice giant, because this 7-year-old in me was going. And my second one actually was my second ever event. And it was on an academy quest. Actually, it wasn't to do with battles. It was on an academy quest. There is nothing more terrifying than being absolutely panel beaten by 30 kids and then kind of going, "Oh, really? That didn't hurt. That was amazing." And the kids thinking it was absolutely amazing. So that being an ice giant and being panel beaten are my 2 best moments, apparently.
Good times. I think one of mine was we did a battle where I played the Grendel General, and the players needed to kidnap me because at some point in the next 90 minutes I would be receiving a winged messenger containing vital army information. And they managed to catch me fairly early into the battle, which was quite exciting. I then got carried around at sword point because they impaled my legs for a good 40 minutes or so. And I had some pretty cool role play with the people keeping me captive. And then we got to the point where they for reasons that defy reason, because people decided to torture me horribly. So there was this. They were being pushed back towards the gate, but they obviously needed to keep me alive and on the field so I could receive the winged messenger. So there were orcs fighting just out of my eye line. Players surrounding me, and I had some lovely people from High Guard. One who was at my upper end of my body, gently mopping my brow and promising me that everything would be all right, and we were united in the spirit of fraternity, while some other people from High Guard were torturing the shit out of me by cutting my toes off. It was horrible, but I really enjoyed it, so thanks for that. So we're going to have a couple more questions, and then we'll have one to finish on. So I'm going to go with this one because it's a real quickie to answer, and in fact I'm probably just going to say it. So what are the signature sounds of each nation? We talked a little bit about the signature costume for each of the barbarian nations. I want to talk about sounds because if you're going to bring a musical instrument monstering, then why would you not? So it's very simple. For the Yatun, it's cool war horn type things. For the Grendel, it's very much drums. And for the Druge, it's those terrifying Aztec death whistle things that you can rattle off a 3D printer for about 20p each. So if you're looking to bring a musical instrument monstering, which I would encourage you to do so, those are the ideal ones. So we're going to go with this one. Are the battle team ever likely to expand their range of special effects in terms of pyrotechnics and or loud noises? Or is this constrained by the utterly anarchic nature of the battles?
So, yeah, I guess interesting question. In terms of pyrotechnics, there are certainly limits that we have on site. So there are certain things we obviously can't use. It's part of a working farm. I think that's fairly understandable. But yeah, obviously we use sort of the special effects people have seen during battles. We've got the smoke, kind of that fog of war going on. We have things like the Druge poison smoke that we use. A couple other things, I guess, that we've used during Valorn skirmishes. The SFX team within sort of plot production, I think at Empire, have got some very cool ideas about sort of how we can possibly do certain things. Kind of, I guess, not quite fireworks, but flashes, smoke powders and things. But yeah, I think the question here identifies that difficulty of players won't necessarily be in the right place at the right time when things like that go off. So I think maybe it's a thing that we can look at, but yeah, no guarantees of anything soon.
I think for me is I am a big fan of WYSIWYG type stuff, and I very much like any kind of pyrotechnic-y shenanigans on the battlefield to actually have some in-game mechanic and reasoning behind them. This is a personal opinion, obviously. It's like, I love the smoke that we have because it looks really cool in the pictures that people take of me. But equally, there's a part of me that goes, there's nothing on fire, why is there smoke everywhere? Which I find a bit jarring. No offense to you, Goodbeard, who puts in all the work to deploy the smoke. Thanks, mate. Don't kill me. Daisy, do you enjoy the FX on the battlefield? Would you like to see more, less?
Yeah, I quite like it.
Thanks, Daisy.
Sorry, you broke up. It begins with the same letter. It's not my
very
fault.
similar sounding. It's
I know
fine.
you're both carrying pets.
He was causing havoc, so I get to come in.
Yeah, so was she.
Yeah, I think it definitely adds something to the battles. I know a lot of people get worried about the smoke, like if it's going to hurt the lungs and whatnot, but I think as of yet it hasn't. I don't think it's a sort of smoke that will. But yeah, watch. Stop it. Sorry.
Cool.
I do like the miasma effects. That's always fantastic. Especially when you can see it coming across towards you, like, oh no, here it comes. He's like, oh no, it's in me. It's got me. So that's always nice. Well, not nice, but you know what I mean.
Awesome. Other Daisy?
No, I'm not answering now.
All right.
Let's move on.
So I think we're going to wrap up with a final question. Tom, do you remember what we were going to finish with?
I think it was what is our greatest moment? What is our greatest battle that we've done? Yeah, hang on, I've got it here. Which battle that you have been involved with running was the one you are proudest of, and why? I have a feeling both Andy and I are going to say exactly the same battle.
You go first, Tom.
So, I think, and I'm pretty certain Andy will change his mind once I've told everybody. So for me, the best battle we've run so far was perhaps the battle at the end of last year. So the Jotun battle that we ran on the Sunday of E4. This was the players defending essentially a stockade just outside a monastery. This was where we deployed the ice giants. So it was a fantastic battle. And from my point of view, what happened in that battle was very much exactly how we think the Jotun should fight. We had some fantastic deployments of their units, their big heavy units. The Skaldea warriors kind of came up, deployed, marched their lines up and engaged. Then you had their line breakers and the flanking units doing exactly what they needed to do, really tied up the players, broke through lines, pushed people back. So we had a battle that really kind of exemplified what the Jotun are about, and that worked fantastically.
Nice. Dave.
Really annoyingly, the same as Tom, because but one of my other favourite ones was a really simple one, which was the Husk Apocalypse. Is the best way I can describe it. From hearing other people IC and OC talk about it, from my job as the War Scout, and from when people walked on that field and just the Husk just turned on them, people genuinely, I think, is the best way to describe it. And easy, simple, but it was massive.
Reasonable. Davey?
I was already on, wasn't I? I was already on. Oh, obviously I've never run a battle, but I think the most successful time for our elite monster unit was the first time we went out as Druge. For some reason, everything just clicked. I don't know if I was just somehow really good at commanding on my first go ever, or if the players made a lot of mistakes because they didn't know what to expect from the Druge, since I hadn't fought them in a long time, probably that one. But we just could just pick people off. It was really strange. I haven't been able to do it since. I think just waiting for the right moment when a whole, League mercenary banner just separated off and they cut them down. Same with a group of Varushkans. It was horrible, really. But
there are
just went really well. It was.
There are some moments of the battle runner when you find yourself just like wincing a little bit as you watch it unfold, and it was. You're quite right. People came to that battlefield and clearly had forgotten what the Druge were like. So sorry for everyone whose characters died. At least you're still having fun with the new person.
Yeah. This was really bad, but also it was really fun.
I think for me, so one of the things that makes a battle for me is dynamic movement. And we did a battle earlier this year with the Grendel, where there was a fortified line all the way across the field, and the Grendel started off holding the line. The Imperial forces had to come on and drive them back from the fortification, take the fortification, and then hold the fortification. And the way we envisaged the battle working was having this static line of defence, but still with a huge amount of dynamic movement of the Imperial troops having to reinforce different parts of the line and move troops around behind the palisade to repulse the telegraphed attacks that were coming in. And equally from the Grendel side, it was the same. It was like looking at where the weak points are, where are we going to push, where are we not going to push. So even though the battle was a static line defence, the amount of dynamism and movement and troop movement and redeployment during the course of the battle was absolutely spot on. And that's one of the things that I look for in a battle that makes it fun and interesting, is that that dynamism, that jeopardy of decision making. You know, and for me, that's what battles are about. It's not about hitting people with a rubber stick. Cool. So I think we'll draw it to a close there. Thank
Sounds
you, you folks, for being with me here this evening. Thank you to Mark for facilitating. And if you've not had enough of Empire-based goodies, for those of you who are empty of things to do tomorrow at 2 o'clock, there is going to be a genuinely quite interesting version of one of these with some members of the plot team. So if you want to understand more about how plot works at Empire and where the levers you are for you to pull, and how you understand how it all goes together, I genuinely recommend tuning to that. It should be quite good. I will be there trolling in the comments on Twitch. So thanks very much for coming, everybody, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, take care.
Okay.